Okay, we've called the meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. and I'm asking for any declaration of interest at this time from any of the councilors, deputy mayor. No one's putting their hand up at this point, so we'll move right on to number 3, delegations and presentations. Katie Mahone from KPMG 2021 audit findings presentation. So we'll ask to turn this over to Katie. And we will, there we go. Somebody's got a cat. It was the deputy mayor's cat. I can see him grinning. Okay, we have Katie on the line. We just need her to share her. There we go. And unmute. Perfect.
Sorry about that. I had a little bit of technical difficulties, but I made it on.
Perfect. Thank you. So you can go right into your delegation, Ms. Mahone.
Thank you. I will ask through you, Your Worship, would you like me to share my screen, or does everyone have the audit findings report in front of them?
They do have it in front of them, but we'll ask you to share the screen for the public that are watching.
All right, can I get a head nod or a thumbs up? Yep, perfect. All right, well, thank you for inviting me here today. I am happy to say it's May already. I'm not sure how that happened, but happy to say that we have another audit year behind us. So what I am going to propose to do today is to flip through the audit findings report, touch on any highlights as we go through. I won't go through everything in detail, but happy to take any questions as they may arise. I also have noted that there is a staff report after this presentation, which goes through the financial statements in quite some detail. So I will focus more on the audit side of the house, less on the financial statement numbers, but again, happy to take any questions that anyone may have. So with that, I will flip open to the executive summary, and just a few points to note here. That at this point, at this time, we are substantially complete the audit. What that means is that pending the conversations here today, as well as council's approval of the financial statements, we will be in a position to finalize the financial statements. You will note up on the screen here that this report was completed on April 25th. At that point, we still had not received the legal letter, which is standard. We do date it for the audit report date. So happy to say that no items or no issues were noted on that. The other thing that I want to highlight on this executive summary before we get into the bulk of the report is just around independence. So each and every year we are required to have a quick conversation with yourselves as it relates to independence. To the extent that we as KPMG perform any non-audit services that may be seen to encroach upon that independence, we would be required to have those conversations with council here today, although happy to note that we do not complete any of those non-audit services, so nothing noted there. So opening to the first page on the audit risks and results, this is the audit risk, specifically the fraud risk as it relates to management override of controls. Now, this is a presumed fraud risk dictated by Canadian auditing standards. What that means is that this risk is in all audits across the country, and we are required to do work on it in each and every audit. And so how we do that is we get the full GL. What we do is we run it through a software program based on some high-risk criteria. Anything that meets those predefined criteria, it comes out, generates a report to which we would then look at those journal entries, specifically look at the backup, the support, make sure they were properly authorized, all of that. So we did that work again this year, and happy to say no issues noted there. On the next page, I will apologize. There is a typo right here. This should not say fraud, risk from management, override of controls. We just went over that on the previous page. This should say the fraud risk from revenue recognition. And so what this slide is speaking to, and our response specifically to address revenue recognition, is again, in each audit within Canada, revenue is a significant financial statement caption. So to the extent there are any components of revenue that are subject to some uncertainty or some perhaps estimates or judgment, we always make sure to spend a little bit more time on those areas, and they do become an area of focus. So within the township, not unlike other municipalities, where we really zero in on is around some of the grants, and specifically grants that have restrictions in place. So that could be restrictions on when they're used, how they're used, certain eligibility criteria. So what we do there is we do get a report of the spend that relates to the certain grant funding, and we use a statistical sampling method to run through the samples, run through the expense detail, and agree those amounts back to supporting documentation. The one we've noted in particular up on the screen around Safe Restart, the reason we flagged that this year is, as much as COVID unfortunately is not new, the funding is still relatively new, and anytime there are new funding letters as they come from the government, there's always a little bit of some different interpretations across various municipalities. So this is one grant that we make sure we dive into a little bit deeper, knowing that there has been some of that difference of interpretation. But happy to say for your township, everything looked good. There was nothing unusual or significant noted from there. Another item that we always like to have a quick conversation on each year is around whether there are any new auditing standards or accounting standards that have been implemented or adopted during the year. Happy to say that this year, fiscal 2021, there were no new auditing standards and no new accounting standards. This was the first year in about 4 years, we can say that. So it was a little bit of a breathing room for us, a little bit of a breather year, especially because we do know up here under the future implementation section, we do know that there is a fairly significant standard coming in the fiscal 2023 year, and that is the standard related to asset retirement obligations. So this is one that we are working with public sector entities across the board, so not just municipalities, but specifically school boards and hospitals as well, trying to get ahead of this one before fiscal 2023. We've had some webinar sessions, some kind of high-level training sessions that we've invited management to come and participate in. It's still quite early days. We do have a resource out of our Ottawa office who is working directly with the ministry on developing some templates to help ease the implementation of the standard. So I won't go into it in much more detail than that, other than to say it is a fairly significant standard that will be coming in the future, but we are trying to get ahead of it and working with municipalities across the province to make sure that we're in a good place much before 2023. So then here we have materiality. So materiality is an important audit concept. It is what we refer to as a aggregate number that we would say would impact the decisions of users of the financial statements. You can see there we have set materiality at 300,000, which is based on a percentage of expenses. Again, we look to Canadian auditing standards to indicate the appropriate percentages to apply. For a municipality, we would look for anywhere from a 0.5 to a 3% range. So you can see there you're at 2.2%. So right in that kind of mid to higher end range of what is deemed appropriate. That 300,000 is quite a large number, but rest assured that is the aggregate materiality level set for the financial statements as a whole. The number that would be of more importance, I would say, to the group here today would be that of the auditing posting threshold number. That's that $15,000 number. at the bottom here, that's the number to the extent to which we audit to, where if we were to have encountered any differences, we would have had those conversations on whether the entries need to be booked into the statements. And so really just noting here, materiality, important concepts. We did not have any corrected entries this year in the financial statements. And that really speaks to a testament of the quality of the books and records maintained throughout the year by the finance department. So a big kudos goes out to them for all of their hard work, not only with us through the audit process, but throughout the year as well. And then after that, we get into the financial statement highlights. So I will go through this quite quickly because, like I said, I know there is a much more detailed staff report that goes into the ins and outs of these numbers, but I do just want to touch on just some of the larger highlights. So a very strong cash position for the township. Taxes receivable, they have decreased since last year. That's always a good thing to see. Accounts receivable, that has increased a little bit, but that's really just a function of timing at year end, specifically around some of the government sources, so HST, the ISIP, and then also the casino revenue. Q4 2021 was significantly larger than 2020. Within your financial liabilities, again, just some quick notes there. Other current liabilities, that's that $512,000 number. Its main increase is due to the unspent accessibility grant funding at year end, which wasn't there in the prior year, as well as there was a pretty large increase due to building deposit permits that you also see on the revenue side when we get there as well. Within your obligatory reserves, this is where your unspent gas tax remains. So there was a large contribution for this year. It wasn't fully spent, so the unspent portion sits here as a financial liability. And then within your capital assets, that's always the function, the change year over year of amortization offset by any additions during the year. And then we've just noted on the side here what some of the more significant additions to capital assets were. From here, we just have a bit of a graphical presentation of where the investment in capital assets is. What we do is we do compare this to some of the peer municipalities just to make sure there isn't anything significantly different. So nothing to note here. Within your reserves, we have a 3-year trend. And so as we go through each year, we will add a new year in and you will be able to see what the trending line is. Obviously on a 3-year trend line here, you can see it is going up each year, which is great to see, especially knowing that the asset management plan that's due in June, July of this year is coming into play, and the capital asset strategy is, I know, on the forefront of council's mind across the province. So ensuring there is, substantial reserves in place is always good to see. And then from here, we just have a slide that speaks to the statement of operations. So again, I know the staff report has more detail, so we're really just touching on the highlights. Property taxation has gone up from last year. That's mainly a function of the increase in the MPAC assessment, which is mainly due to new builds and increase in building permits. Within the expenses, nothing significant really to note there. We do have a couple of comments on the side, which are consistent. I did take a quick look at the staff reports, so nothing significant to note there. Ending in an annual surplus of just over $1 million for the year. Yes.
Katie, can I have a question from Councillor Gorell, if we can interrupt your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship. The line item, transportation services, what would that entail? Thank you.
So transportation services. Oh,
no, go ahead. Sorry.
Transportation services is where you will see the majority of the roads projects. So roads projects, depending on their nature, sometimes they are capitalized if the extent is to put in, say, a new road, but to the extent it's just repairing roads, maintaining them, that's where all of the work flows through on the statement of operations in this line item here.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this point?
I have no other hands up, so you can keep on moving.
Okay. So then this slide here, similar to the other slide, is just a note of the operating expenses in a graphical format, looking really at the percentage of where each of the spend is. Again, compared to some of your peers in the sector, nothing significant or unusual to note. So again, good to see on that front. And then after that, we get into the appendices, which I won't go through in detail, but happy to take any questions at this time.
Okay. Are there any questions for Ms. Mahone at this time? Go ahead, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I've read a few times in the past 6 or 8 months reference to gas tax funding. Are you aware of any changes to that?
I think, sorry, do you mean the calculation of how it's being determined, or the accounting treatment of it? Sorry.
No, the calculation itself.
Yeah, so I think actually I can't see everyone who's on, but I might ask.
Okay, we'll get the treasurer
yeah.
to come forward.
Yeah, I think that might have been part of her presentation as well, is to go into that.
Go ahead.
Through your worship. So there have been some recent announcements about gas tax that were more related to transit. So there's been some changes that actually affect municipalities have transit systems more so they don't really affect us. Now we did receive, which is in the report and we did receive a top-up amount in 2021 that we weren't expecting. So at the end of 2021, we do have more in that reserve fund than I was anticipating because we didn't spend that top-up. So that's why that balance is a bit higher at the end of the year. I'm not aware of any other changes right now for, it's actually called Canada Community Building Fund. They changed the name, it's not federal gas tax anymore. So that's a bit confusing too, to add to it, but I'm not aware of any other changes right now. And I think our funding for this year is consistent, like for 2022 I believe is consistent with what we had been told previously. But like last year, that top amount, we had no idea it was coming till it got announced, like I think a month before. So
Follow up. Nope, we're good. Okay. Any other questions for the treasurer or the auditor? Well, I just would like to say what a pleasure it's been to work with you again, and how happy we are to get these very pleasant reports saying that all is good. We're in good financial hands, and things are looking better every year. And I know that that's a credit to our financial team, as well as us just, helping them make the decisions here at the table, but based on their information. So we appreciate your attention to the detail and making sure that we're covered on all accounts. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving into an in-camera portion of the meeting currently, and number 4.1 on the agenda, and the motion comes forward from Councillor Maybe and seconded by Councillor Fody. The council adjourned to go in camera in order to discuss an item that relates to security of the property of the municipality, KPMG 2021 audit findings. So with that, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? So we'll move in camera and come back out of